When Video Games Were Simple by Bisley Channel. All right, let's go. Boo.
Do you ever think back to when video games were just simple? When games could just be games and you could be an idiot 6-year-old who can't figure out how to get off the starting island in Kingdom Hearts. Yeah, you actually, you gotta hit the tree to get the coconuts. The coconuts will fall down.
What's up, Dalek? How you doing?
It feels like back then they could just make anything they wanted to. Studios took chances, building experiences that, while not perfect, were still iconic. And don't get it twisted, all right? I like the AAA games we're getting right now. I'm definitely not saying that video games aren't fun anymore. But I can't help looking back at all these older games and missing the charm that they all had, especially compared to now. They definitely weren't all fantastic, but when I look back at them, they all just seem so whimsical and wonderfully simple to me. And sure, you know, that opinion is probably largely shaped around nostalgia, and it's more likely I miss the simpler times in my life, which we'll talk about nostalgia more towards the end of the video, but I do mean this literally. I adore the simplicity of the games from this era. When I talk about a time when video games were simple, I think a different time period probably comes to each of our heads, right? For you, it might be the PS1, or even the Atari if you're ancient and decaying. For me, I think of the PS2 and just all those classic games from that console. Like Kingdom Hearts,
as much as I love the PS1 games,
Ratchet and Clank, the weird game with the alien face on the cover.
I do think that's
too much to pick up. The
PS2 generation was probably my favorite generation.
That were all just exactly the same, except that one. I loved that one. When every game didn't have to be a groundbreaking cinematic masterpiece.
Just vibing?
It could just be a fun game. One aspect I really admire about those PS2 games is that they seem to prioritize gameplay.
You better be vibing
fun over anything. Whereas anymore it seems gameplay gets sidelined by the cutscenes and the story. The gaming industry has changed a lot over the years, okay? It's not your grandpa's GameCube anymore. We got esports teams and VR chat twerk-offs now. The Last of Us is a phenomenal game series that tells a familiar yet strikingly unique story and has some of the best character writing I've ever seen in a video game. Due to some not so careful redactions, we learned that on their latest entry, The Last of Us Part 2, Naughty Dog spent $220 million over the course of 6 years to develop the game. To put that into perspective, they developed the first Crash Bandicoot game for $1.7 million. With that $220 million,
which still seems like a lot.
Stunning, cutting-edge graphics, as well as creating a gripping narrative and overall impactful experience. But when you play these games, it becomes abundantly clear that The Last of Us does not embrace its identity as a video game at all. The gameplay loop consists of you walking around slowly, looking at everything like you're in a museum, maybe avoiding some mushroom zombies sometimes. And if you walk into an area with waist-height walls, you know some guys are gonna come out and try to shoot at you. The combat is passable at best, and over time just becomes a boring obstacle between you and the next cutscene. It really is a shame, you know, because the world they've built is so beautiful to look at.
Only I can get some grant for millions.
I'm all for story in a game, but it should never take precedent over the actual gameplay. And hey, I'm a problem solver, all right? I'm here to help you, Naughty Dog. I'm gonna tell you exactly what you have to do to fix this problem. You go through a couple of levels, you get us really hooked in, and then you give Ellie a fishtail and you have her swim around and sing a really bad song with Ariel from The Little Mermaid. And the song's got to be really, really bad.
Yes.
It's got to be horrible. No, you're right. You can't do that, okay? It's a serious game with a serious tone. We don't need to do any of that. You know, no game has ever retained its serious tone while breaking immersion slightly for the sake of fun. It's never been done. It's not going to happen, all right? Bad example. I'm sorry. Let's look at the Insomniac Spider-Man games instead. You know, they're wacky and less based in realism. They had a phenomenal story, except for the third act of the second game. I'm still pretty mad about that. Peter should have been Venom. I'm standing on that business. And the gameplay here, oh my God, they got it perfect. They did it. They did what Naughty Dog couldn't do. Sometimes. I could web sling around the city all day, and they had their Little Mermaid moment with Venom and I guess Mary Jane now. That was all right. But what I want to talk to you about specifically are the mini games. You know, those little moments where it's like, oh, Peter's a scientist. Here's some scientist stuff. Match up these different colors and lines because he's a scientist. It's science stuff. Those have got to be the worst mini games ever made. And Insomniac knows it, because why else would they give you an option to skip them. It's all right, whatever. They didn't come up
They
that
give
much.
you
in the
an
first
option
one.
to
I can
skip
get over
shit?
it. At least I got to skip them and move on. Maybe they'll take them out by the second one. Wrong. It's different this time. Now it's in 3D and you got to take out the bad shapes. It's worse. It's somehow so much worse in this one. And I know it's a relatively small problem to point out, but man, just situations like this just make me miss games like Sly Cooper that would put you in a submarine and say, there's crabs coming to steal the treasure. You have to shoot all the crabs and make sure they don't come get it. They didn't bother trying to make it make sense within the story. They just made something fun. I don't think every AAA game needs to be goofy, but I do think that video games are at their best when they embrace their identity as video games and deliver experiences only they can. It
Like
seems
if
they
I
really
wanted
went
to
in
watch
this
a movie,
direction
I'd watch a
because these
movie.
cinematic games have the most wide reach. They don't really want to risk it with something that might not appeal to everyone, right? We could never get an insane concept like Kingdom Hearts made today. The idea of taking
Imagine having to
these
play the
two
game to
insanely
advance in a
different
video game,
franchises,
right?
Final Fantasy, a JRPG series, and the Disney multiverse, and mashing them together in some big world-hopping adventure led by a character nobody's ever heard of. That is just not something we would get today. And do you know how this idea came to be? Well, apparently back in the 90s, Square Enix and Disney both had offices in the same building. And one fateful day, an employee from Square Enix and an employee from Disney just so happened to end up in the same elevator. And they got to talking and they were like, hello, Disney employee I just met. Wouldn't it be cool to mash up our universes together and then send some kid around them beating everything up with a key? And that, kids, is how Kingdom Hearts came to be. I read it on nextshark.com, so you know it's true. If there ever was a video game that embraced its identity as a video game, it is goddamn Kingdom Hearts. This game makes no sense, but is so much fun. Why the hell is Cloud from Final Fantasy making a deal with Hades and fighting in the hero games on Olympus? I don't know, who cares? I'm Sora and I'm gonna hit this big dog with a key I found. When you travel between the different Disney worlds in Kingdom Hearts, sometimes the art style, the character designs, and even entire gameplay mechanics will change based on where you go. I keep referencing the Little Mermaid level in Kingdom Hearts because genuinely when I played this, it was so mind-blowing to me. I love that even at a point so deep into this game, they were still willing to change the fundamental mechanics of how you play it just to keep things fresh. And don't even get me started on the goddamn Goomy ship. I don't know if it's Goomy or Gummy. I've been saying Goomy. When I first played it, it was kind of annoying at first. I was thinking, why am I doing this? But now anymore, I'm traveling between the worlds and I'm up in the Goomy ship. I'm just shooting stuff. Why the hell do they need a spaceship to get between the Disney worlds? I don't know why they thought they needed a spaceship, but it was awesome. And it was the Goomy ship, and shut the fuck up. I'm not entirely sure if this is the case, but it really seems to me like
I love
games
customizing the Goomy ship.
Studios were willing to make pretty much anything and just throw it out there. And listen, I was eating it up. I loved sitting down crisscross applesauce on the floor of a GameStop, just going through the wall of so many different PS2
Crisscross
games, picking out
applesauce.
insane shit like Marvel Nemesis, Rise of the Imperfects. I feel like I dreamed this. Sure, they were goofy and didn't exactly maximize profit, but does that mean they weren't worth making? I guess where AAA's concerned, it's just always going to be about the money. And if you want a passionate game developer, you look to the indie games. There's got to be some video essay YouTuber to indie game pipeline, because I was never really that into indie games, but recently I played Hades and Rollerdrome, and it was some of the most fun I've had playing games in a long time. While it seems the games that prioritize fun overall are only coming from indie developers anymore, there is a genre of game that was lost to time completely. And that, my friends, is the shitty licensed games.
Oh, man.
It's gotta be the greatest loss in my lifetimes. Those shitty early 2000s movie tie-in licensed games that came with every mildly successful property. If there was a cartoon you liked in the early 2000s, tie-in game. If there was a movie you kind of enjoyed, tie-in game. Look up any franchise that had moderate success in this time period and add the game at the end.
What's
and
up,
you're
Amelia?
probably gonna
How you
get
doing?
something. It would be impossible to count how many there were, and they were all bad, but I loved them anyway. Like the Cat in the Hat movie tie-in game. What
Some
a
of them were
beautiful
good.
nightmare that
Like
was.
the
Give me a
Spider-Man the
bottle
movie
of
games.
Dayquil and the Cat in
They
the
weren't
Hat
perfect, but they
PS2
were
game,
great.
and I'm having a great week. If you've ever played one of these games before, you've probably seen this little intro screen.
THQ. It's in the game. That's EA Sports.
THQ was responsible for not all, but a
Sports.
lot of these tie-in games. It seemed their business model was to buy up the license for a mildly successful property, pump out a cheap, easy game, and launch it right when that movie or TV show was peaking in popularity so that they could feed off of that hype. And clearly it worked, because in the span of a couple of years, they released literal hundreds of games. They hit the cartoons hard. They got Jimmy Neutron, Scooby-Doo, so much SpongeBob, Fairly Odd Parents, Tack and the Mother-Fudging Power of Juju, this one was a banger, Rugrats, Teen Titans, Barnyard, Danny Phantom, Avatar The Last Airbender. Seriously, so much SpongeBob. And they hit the movies too. Cars, The Incredibles, Ratatouille, Wall-E, Up. They had Star Wars under their belt, and Episode 3 was a slapper. These guys dominated the licensed tie-in games, and eventually, they just stopped. I was looking around the internet trying to figure out why they stopped. You know, where did these go? And everything I found kind of suggested that they didn't stop making them, but they moved over to the more profitable sector of the video game market, the mobile games.
Hey, just was wondering, is this an out-of-season April Fool's joke?
No. And you know what?
You
They
guys
were
don't have
probably
phones?
right to do so. Even I ended up spending money in Family Guy: The Quest for Stuff. I wanted to build my Quahog to look cool.
Holy fuck.
There were a lot of these games, and most of them were bad. But for every 100 shitty cookie-cutter games, there was one gem. Odds are, if you had a PS2, you probably played The Simpsons Hit and Run, which,
Right.
by all means, should have just been
People love
another
that
shitty
game.
tie-in in the series.
never
of
played
shitty
it.
Tie-ins, but this one just so happened to be amazing. It was a GTA clone that was like better than GTA. In fact, it did
How
the
about an
multiple
arena
characters,
fighter?
the character switching before GTA 5 did it. That means The Simpsons predicted GTA 5. It is time to write another Kotaku
Damn.
article. Some of my personal favorites were The Matrix: Path of Neo. I don't know why I liked this. I've never seen The Matrix. I just really was drawn to this game because it made me feel like insane. I don't know how to describe it. I loved the Star Wars Episode 3 tie-in game because it had this cool alternate ending, and I was obsessed with this fight on Mustafar between Anakin and Obi-Wan, and so being able to do that and get a different result just like blew my little mind. And obviously, Spider-Man 2. I think a lot of people
Oh, of
forget
course.
this was a movie tie-in game.
Of
and even
course.
this one had great mini games. The most iconic mini game where you go around delivering pizzas with that insane music playing. Why couldn't we get that in Insomniac Spider-Man instead of Match the Shapes and Colors? A licensed tie-in game that a lot of people liked was SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, and I know a lot of
SpongeBob.
people like this one because it got a big fat ring. We've established that the game studios are in this
Yeah,
for the
like,
money, right? And it's
imagine
safe to
how
assume
crazy that
they
really
want the
is.
safest bets for their money.
A shitty
The most
licensed
revenue with
game
the least risk.
ended up
No-brainer.
being so
Why don't they
good,
just
it
take
got a
games
modern
people already
remake.
like and do it again, but like make it pretty. Personally, I think this aversion to risk is absolutely doing damage to the industry, but what do I know? I'm just a guy, and clearly the numbers say otherwise. But I think in all of this, the consumer is not blameless. It is me. I'm the consumer. They're only gonna do something if they know we're gonna buy it, and oh man, am I gonna buy it. I've been loving the remakes lately, I'm not gonna lie. I don't really think we needed 5 iterations of the 2 Last of Us games, but for example,
I feel like the
Resident Evil 4
reason-
remake or the Dead Space remake.
I feel like the reason a lot of remakes do so well, even from people who have opinions like this, is because modern games, modern IPs just kind of suck. So it's like, yeah, let me get that game from my childhood re-envisioned for current year. And even if you don't like it when it comes out, it's like, well, you can still play the original, but now you got like a talking point to say, hey, remember when they remade this and made it worse, you know? Like, it's better at creating moments and topics of discussion than like modern AAA games.
Were some of my favorite games in 2023. They may have been remakes, yes, rehashing old ideas, but I felt like in those 2 examples specifically, they expanded the gameplay systems and made changes.
There are some games
that
I want to
honestly
remake of because
justified
it's
a
only
remake.
available on
In
old
Dead Space-
systems. Okay, hear me out. What if instead of remaking old games for new systems, we remake old systems? And they kind of started doing that with the minis. But like, I'm saying, what if they just fucking, like, what if they just re-release the Sega Saturn? You know? Like, just like, do it over again. Let's fucking try it. You know, put the PS2 back on shelves. And then re-release old games. Because, like, the retro market is so fucked right now when it comes to, like, real hardware that people would rather emulate, right? Because it's, one, it's obviously cheaper, but it's so much cheaper because, like, a lot of the quality retro games, to get a complete in-box copy, you're paying, like, triple digits. Like, imagine if they re-released the Sega Saturn and priced it at $100, and then they slowly started rolling out old, like, new releases of old Saturn games. And now, like, oh shit, instead of paying $500 to get an old copy of Panzer Dragoon Saga, bam, here you go, $50. Panzer Dragoon Saga. You could get it right now. Right? Wouldn't that be fucking cool?
Alone, the zero gravity overhaul was game changing, as well as a voice protagonist where there wasn't one before. So they're not just throwing stuff out, you know, they actually do seem to care about some of these games. The Resident Evil 4 remake was a breath of fresh air for me because I got the quality of life from a AAA game, but the goofy, campy fun from a PS2 game. The graphics were stunning and the gameplay was tight and well optimized, and I also got to go up to the shady weapons dealer and buy a rocket launcher to just shoot the final boss with. I just cheesed the entire fight, and the game let me because it was more fun that way. The simplicity that I had been missing was right there, and I loved every second of it. To me, this trend of remakes is proof that I'm not alone in missing a time when video games were simple.
My only real complaints about Resident Evil 4 remake
at any moment
is
possible,
the
and
crafting system.
Only good if they are profitable. I am happy that younger generations and just more people in general get to experience these games that I loved as a kid and see why for themselves. And also, I'm happy that we get to experience these games in ultra realistic graphics, 4K huevos shrinking technology.
And you know what? Going back to my previous point about remaking old consoles, right? Fucking his point now of like 4K and shit. Like, if they remade old consoles, they could realistically, like, make those old consoles be able to upscale the games for modern displays. You know, even if they did it like cheaply, as long as the consoles could still have the old outputs for like hardcore idiots like me. Like, if every game, like every remade old console, came with one of those like cheapo HDMI converters that, you know, that are sold for like $25 on eBay and shit. You can also just make the new consoles be backwards compatible. I mean, that would be cool, but like that, you know, that presents a bunch of other problems. But like, I'd be down with that too. You know, anything to get the old games on more, you know, more modern eyes, I guess.
Only playable with the Gigafart 8500 graphics card. You may need to upgrade your PC to play this game. I can appreciate good graphics. I mean, I really like when a game looks pretty, but I think this looks better than this. And this looks better than this. Technically, this has higher resolution and better lighting, but this has a better art direction.
Yes.
High resolution textures and pretty lighting are always going to be outshined by inspired art direction, creativity, and a focus on atmosphere. This isn't something that's gone from modern gaming. In fact, a lot of recent games have left my jaw on the floor because they're so beautiful. Bloodborne, and Bloodborne. Holy shit, Bloodborne. But I think it was more common to focus on art direction back then because they were limited. They couldn't make a realistic looking game. They had to do something unique. Even the game's shooting
Loss
for a
of limitation is the
realistic
death of
approach could
creativity.
not pull off realism. I mean, that is not realism. But still, it's iconic. A phrase I really like and I've used before in one of these videos is that limitation breeds creativity. Trying to make a game
That's basically
back
what
on
I
the
just said.
PS2, I imagine was extremely limiting, but it made them so creative, making these incredibly unique.
What up,
looking
Sin?
games. I often find that when creating something and you run into a problem, that solution that you
Hydration
come up
da.
with to the problem leads to an infinitely more interesting and unique final product. Like I said, we still get a lot of stunning games coming out lately, but I feel like now with the ability to actually create games that, while not perfectly realistic, look pretty damn real, that becomes the only focus, is making a game that looks realistic, not one that is creative in its visuals. In a lot of ways, I miss those older games that we used to get, but I'm also glad for all the games that we get now.
Go to
Ghost of
sleep,
Tsushima
Sid.
is one of my favorite games of all time, and Baldur's Gate 3, which I made an entire video on, you should go watch it, was a phenomenal experience. Compare that to the PS2 Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2, and it's no contest there. The only reason I might want to pick up and play Dark Alliance 2 is because I miss playing it with my dad when I was a kid. I used to live in this big greenhouse right on the corner lot and had a baseball field right across the street. I think the house used to be a church. It was definitely haunted. I was 8 years old when that house caught fire. I remember I was watching SpongeBob and I walked into the kitchen and I saw these crazy flames up all over the place. Long story short, the house got completely ruined and my dad got hurt pretty bad. But he recovered fine. They just took some skin from his butt and put it on his hand. I call it his butt hand. This house though was mostly ruined and the property had a
You didn't get any
separate
notification.
garage, like a
What up,
barn kind of
Doom?
thing, and that garage had an attic. Well, my dad decided
that's
that
crazy,
we were
'cause
gonna
I
fix
pinged
up the house
everybody in the
ourselves
Discord.
and live up in that attic. Him and I shared this airbed up there, and right next to it was a projector that I had hooked up my PlayStation 2 and my original Xbox to. During the day, I'd obviously go to school, and then when I got home, I'd help him build however I could. You know, there wasn't much I could do. I was 8, but I remember doing things like helping him put up the ceiling or chip away at the old stone slate in the fireplace. And when we were done for the day, I would go up and play on that PS2 non-stop. Not to get into too much detail, I'm just some guy on the internet. You don't know me. But I was having a hard time. Something about swinging around the city in Spider-Man 2 just made it all melt away.
Yeah.
You know? I wasn't Zach with all this stress and all these problems I didn't understand. I was Spider-Man. I can only imagine how my dad felt at the time. But he always seemed happy when him and I were playing a video game together. He was just watching me play one. But we had a ton of fun, and we would just laugh and hang out together playing Halo 2 on the Xbox, just going through the campaign. And it was in moments like that where it really felt like everything melted away. It didn't feel like we had just lost everything. You know, it felt like we had everything.
If I ever have kids, like, I hope
we
that I
could
can
ever
be
use.
that.
And it's funny, now sometimes just hearing that PS2 sound, I'm back up in the attic with my dad. Nostalgia is a funny thing that can make you look back fondly on things that might not have been so great, but were somehow perfect in their own way. And escapism through simple pleasures like video games will always be important. I think we all have that game, or just media in general, that was able to give us a break from a hard time in our lives and made us hold on to that experience forever. And so now we judge that media by what it did for us rather than what it actually is. I'd love to hear if there was anything like that that stuck with you, you know, either in a comment or send it to my email at this point. I don't care. I can't promise I'll get back to you, but if you want to, shoot me an email. I might see it. Thank you so much for over 100,000 subscribers.
Hey,
Geek really likes the
congrats.
plaque, so that's good. We send it off to him. He's the real hero here. 100K is crazy. You know, I started another channel a while ago, and it took me so long. I was trying so hard to get to 100K. And with this one, I wasn't even trying. I just kind of did it. I mean, we did it, I guess. I don't know. That shit's cool. This is a cool thing to do. This is my simple pleasure now. So please simply click the card right here and watch another video. This got way too sappy. Click on some other funny shit, please. Okay, goodbye.
Nice. Yeah, that was a good video. It gave me feels.